Hello and welcome back to From the Nosebleeds podcast brought to you by myself, Walter Limbeck, and Jacob Wetzel. Obviously, it's been a while since we last did one. There's been a lot of things going on, not only in the basketball atmosphere, but specifically at Bradley as a whole. And I'm just going to ask you a couple questions, Wetzel, since you were more involved with the team specifically. So do you have first question I'm gonna ask you is probably something I'm not too sure about, but do you have any like deeper insight on what goes on during recruiting, like how the coaches go through the recruiting process with these players and stuff like that?
Um, I think it's kind of what you think it is. Um, each coach kind of has their areas that they're more familiar with, know more coaches. So, Coach Adams obviously is more familiar with Indiana. His dad runs the Indiana Elite program, which churns out, 7, 8 Division I players every year. That's the Connor Hickman, the recruit we have now. I believe he is on that team from Bloomington, Indiana. Um, Coach Bargan works more with Kansas, Nebraska areas, junior colleges, and then Coach Foster kind of does more like Wisconsin, Chicago area. So each coach kind of has their like familiarities and kind of, I don't want to say gets assigned kids, but they kind of, if there's a kid that a coach knows one of those coaches, they kind of try and work those connections and stuff like that. And um, it's kind of just a feeling out process. Kind of you monitor the kid, you watch the kid, watch tape, watch his social media, things like that throughout the year. And I think this year, with limited access to games and stuff, being able to watch kids highlight tapes and things like that are so important. So I think it's probably been a little bit of a struggle for them recruiting. I know international recruiting is a big thing for them. I know the summer before Vile's freshman year, Coach Adams went to Finland for like 2 weeks to watch him, talk with him, talk with his family. So it's things like that that you're not able to do right now. That you have to do all over video, but they put a lot of work in recruiting. Recruiting. It's not quite like football because you just don't have the roster, but it's still a 24/7, 365 event, and I'm sure that they're not satisfied just with Hickman. They're going to go out and try and find another guy or two, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So these questions are all going to kind of lead into like what's happening because I told you yesterday that I've been reading the fan forums and people have got some problems going on. The donors have problems with what's going on and stuff like that. So these questions are all going to tie back into like my point. Um, so like when they're recruiting these players, I assume they sit down with their family, they sit down with their high school coaches, things like that, talk about their character, their grades, things like that, right?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of what you would expect it to be. They obviously like the first connection really stems from coaches knowing that their high school coach, an AAU coach, their AAU coach, something like that can speak more about how they are in practice, how they are before games, how they are after games, things like that. And then when it's kind of becoming evident that this kid can play at our level, we think he on the court can fit, then it's more of, all right, what's his social media like? What is he like, at school during the day? What, talk to his parents, talk to his family, um, get different things like that. Um, so yeah, it is, it's you talk with the parents. I would say, if it's a kid that they really really want, they're really recruiting them hard. You bring the family on a couple visits, you bring them to a couple games, you go and visit them a couple times. You probably have, I'd imagine a kid like Connor Hickman, they've probably had 5 or 6 interactions, Wardle and or an assistant with his family in the recruiting periods that they can legally by NCAA rule to do that. So yeah, it's a lot of talking to their coaches, their parents, and figuring out what kind of kid they are off the court as well.
Right. And you personally, so there's the issue at large that we're kind of getting into right now is obviously the suspension. Initially, it was four players: Jashawn Henry, Elijah Childs, Terry Nolan, and Daniel Kingsby. I know you knew at least two of these players specifically. I mean, you were a part of the teams that they were a part of. Jashawn was just a freshman when you were last there. Eli just a sophomore, but you still knew these kids. So could you kind of speak on their character and like how you saw these kids? Because I'm sure you saw them in more casual settings as well.
Yeah, I mean, so my first reaction seeing those two guys, Jay Sean and Eli, I was shocked because they're two really great guys, two really nice. Not that, Terry and Daniel Art, I just don't know them personally.
Right.
Um, but I mean, both of them like are just they're great guys. They're nice guys. It's just it's you don't want to speculate too much on what happened because you don't know, but you really hope it's just an instance where they made a mistake of inviting people to the room, and that's the mistake that they made. Obviously, we don't know anything, but because I mean, both of them are have always been nice guys. They've always been, um, they were two of the most like personal guys with you. A lot, sometimes there's a handful of guys that came through the program that just never felt like they saw you as a manager and not as a potential friend, a potential person to talk whatever with. And I feel like Jay Sean and Eli were two guys that like they saw you anywhere. They'd say what's up. They were two guys that actually genuinely were a friend to me and the other managers. So um, uh, it was hard seeing those guys' name pop up because I know that they are very very nice guys. They're uh, very high character guys, and so it was tough. And speaking with some former managers who I'm friends with who are a year younger than me, who are around them for another year, they had the same kind of response and sentiment about it. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, coming from somebody who didn't really know them, but I know, I mean, you played intramural basketball for our fraternity and stuff, and they'd show up to the games and kind of razz you a little bit and, give you problems, stuff like that. Just little things like that. And they'd show up during different events that we had, little stuff like that I noticed. So, I mean,
yeah,
obviously, it seemed like they have a good character and everything like that.
yeah,
Uh,
it's the little things like in practice, it's the little things of instead of just dropping the ball, it's throwing the ball to you. Um, like little things like that where they know what our job is and they make our job that much easier. Or like you said, showing up to the games outside of uh in their free time when they don't have to. And
mm,
it's like the same thing, like you're walking in the student center and you're getting something to eat and they come up and talk to you, or they like there's a handful of times I remember we would sit and eat, us managers would sit and eat at the student center and they would come up and sit with us. And it's little things like that where it's just that's the character I know them as going out of their way, interacting with us in their free time when they don't have to. And I feel like, there was a couple players that went through the program in my 4 years that wouldn't have done that. And I feel like you go to other programs and maybe that's not always the case. So, that's kind of my experiences with them. Kind of like you were mentioning with them showing up to games. I mean, there was one team that was comprised of like 4 or 5 managers. They always showed up to watch them play. And, it's just, they don't have to do that. They're taking time out of their day to do that. And it's pretty cool.
right. Yeah, and that's kind of the little stuff that, not a lot of people have an insight to, but luckily you did. Last question I kind of have, and then I'll get into my overall problem with where some fans are standing right now. So could you kind of give us an insight on how road trips were conducted from a team standpoint? Like what were some rules, some boundaries? And obviously things are probably going to be a little different now that there's a pandemic going on and such.
Yeah, I mean it's again, I don't know how it works now, but when we were there, it was, you practice during the day, you get on the bus or the plane or wherever. So Missouri State was a flight, so it was bus to Peoria, take the charter flight from Peoria to Springfield, get on the bus, go to the hotel, um, and then it was, everyone's got a roommate that you're roommates with for the entire season, and um, it really is. You don't, depending on what time the game is the next day, you don't have a lot of downtime. So there'd be, when you're playing a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock game that night, it's team dinner. That's usually an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours long. That you're eating a team meal. You have film that's about 30 minutes long, and then it's everyone's in their rooms. That's it. Like you are in your room at 9 o'clock, and there'd be like surprise room checks, stuff like that. But you're in your room at 9 o'clock, and not lights out, but it's you're there. And then next morning, if you're playing an early game, it's breakfast, film, hour and a half, 2 hours of downtime. Start getting taped, get on the bus, and head out. You play a later game, you have a get up, have breakfast, you kind of hang out for a couple minutes, then we go to shoot around, then you come back, you eat lunch, you have about 3-4 hours of downtime, and then it's pregame meal, get taped, and head out. So, um, you don't really always. The most downtime you have is a couple hours if you're playing like a 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock game. But at that point, you've already had shoot around, and you're usually guys are just kind of laying around, staying off their feet, keeping hydrated. So, um, and all the rooms, like everyone's room is right next to each other. Like it's pretty much like we have an entire hallway. There's 20 rooms in that hallway. We have 12, 13 of them. And then, Wardle stays in another room by himself because he's the head coach. But,
Right.
that's usually how it works. And you take all your stuff with you on the bus to the game. And when the game's over, we head out. And obviously it's different this year's with playing back to backs. But, um, but there's just, yeah, there's not a lot of downtime really outside of a couple hours.
Right. And so now I'm going to get into it. Obviously, we mentioned earlier it was 4 players, and the incident happened, reported, took place between 12:45 a.m., 1:45 a.m. the morning before the game on Saturday against Missouri State. So obviously, you mentioned there's probably like random room checks and stuff like that, but at the same time, these coaches have to go to bed too. They need their sleep as well. They got to be prepared. They've got stuff they've got to do as well. So they're not up at all hours. They're hoping that the players can conduct themselves at a, respectable manner, and that they don't have to watch over them like they're a little kid, because, these are kids who are becoming young men. And so they've got to do their own stuff like that. And like you mentioned, with the recruiting, you talk to these kids' families, you talk to their coaches, you try and get an insight on their character. You talked about 2 of the players. So the big issue I have is, you know, there are a lot of people criticizing Wardle and the coaching staff for what happened. And I feel like that's not right, because ultimately it comes down to the decision made by these players who were involved in the report. It's outside of what Wardle could really control. Yes, it was at the team hotel, things like that, but at the same time, it was at such a late hour. I assume he was probably asleep and he had no idea, along with other coaches. They're trying to get ready for the game, things of that nature. Um, and they go off on further go off on him, saying, they didn't specify like soon enough what was going on, like an investigation and everything. This is a criminal report and criminal investigation right now, not only from like a legal standpoint, but also from a university standpoint. So I'm sure there were either lawyers or there were PR people telling Wardle and the coaching staff, this is what you can say. This is what you can't say. And that's why it took them so long to say, hey, there's a police investigation going on. And people had problem with that. And it's they have to understand, they have to step back, take their fandom back, and understand this is like beyond their control. That's one of the problems. Again, the other problem is that I have with them is their blaming of Wardle for this. Like I've mentioned, he takes into account all these guys' characters and stuff like that. And everybody's human, so everybody makes mistakes. And that's just something that happens. It's natural. Some mistakes are more severe, like in this instance, it might have been a more severe incident, but still, everybody makes mistakes. And just because I'm not saying this instance is okay. We still need more details and stuff like that, but people are human. They're going to make mistakes, and you can't hold somebody else who didn't make the mistake responsible for the players who made those mistakes. And people are saying that, he doesn't have control of the team, this and that. I think he has full control of the team, or else those guys would have still been playing that weekend. And then on Thursday, when more details got released, or I think it was Tuesday actually, when more details got released, then he would have been like, okay, they're suspended now. I think he has full control, and I think he did what was told he had to do, and he said what he had to say, because there's, again, it's a criminal offense right now. They're doing an investigation. I'm sure either lawyers or people from the university said, hey, this is what you do, this is what you say, don't do anything else. And criticizing him for that is also misguided. I understand, like, yeah, you might be donating money and stuff like that to, the basketball program, so you want to know a little more. But at the same time, if you want to know a little more, be a little more on the inside, they would have hired you to be one of the people working with the basketball program. You wouldn't just be some fan on the outside donating money. And that's the issue I have, is people feel like they're entitled to know all this from an outside perspective. I get it, they donate money and everything and they help the program, but at the same time, you're not there running the program 24/7. You're not doing everything that is required to make a successful program and things like that. Those are just a couple things that I have an issue with, of how some of the fans are reacting.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the forum since college, so it's been a while, but that doesn't surprise me that that's how they're reacting. Um, I mean, my thing is so, like, I don't really care when the event, like when it took place. The order you have to see it as this: the police found out at like what, 8:30, I think you said, in the
In
morning.
the morning.
So 5 o'clock game, probably have a shoot around at 11 o'clock ish. So the police, like Wardle and the staff, probably weren't informed until after shoot around. So you're talking, and probably after lunch too. So you're, because the police have to take down everything, they have to get their stuff in order. So now you're talking probably 1 o'clock. They found out 4 hours before the game. They probably start getting taped and leave the hotel at like 3:30. Get to the arena going on, well, probably like 3:15. So you have like 2 hours between when they got back, ate lunch, and that stuff, and when they were supposed to leave. That now you get told you have four players pending in a pending police investigation, and now you're left trying to figure it out. So now Wardle probably has to talk to the compliance officer. He probably has to talk to Dr. Reynolds. He has to talk to Jason Vanetti, who is the SID and social media people. You have to, like, there's a lot that has to happen with all these conversations, because, like, if it was just they showed up late to this or that, or they what, like, if it was not an actual police investigation, it would have happened a lot sooner, more details would have came out. Well, because it was a police investigation, they had little time to get all of this figured out. That is why it came out right before the game, because they waited until the last minute they could to make all the decisions that they needed to make. And I 100% agree with you. People cannot blame Wardle for this. If like I think a lot of me and my friends' initial reaction, and like we were kind of throwing it out in the group chat, we were talking in, it was it's COVID related. They broke some sort of team standard for COVID. Maybe they went to, I know the hotel we stay at in Springfield. There is a gas station right across the street. Maybe they 2 a.m. in the morning they left the hotel, went to go get us candy bar or something, and they broke COVID protocols and team standards. That is completely different. So Wardle basically has limited information, and like suspending them for those 2 games was the correct move, because you cannot play a player pending a police investigation.
Right.
Now the details come out about it being a police investigation. Now it is for sure the right move to suspend them and to say they are suspended indefinitely. The press conference he gave the other day was what I expected. I think it's what a lot of people expected. It's coach speak. It was prepared for him. People in the athletic department and probably higher up, just Bradley officials in general, wrote that for him, told him what to say. But like when it comes to people questioning like Wardle's take part in this and his control of the team, that is completely just the wrong way to look at it. And Wardle has control of his program. Wardle knows what is going on. Basketball coaches and college coaches in general are control freaks. They have to know everything going on. Wardle is no different. So to sit there and say he doesn't know what's going on, he knows what's going on. But the end of the day is you have four guys. Two of them have been in your program for 3 years or more, and 4 years. The other two are juniors and seniors who have been in college programs before. You shouldn't, like you said, you shouldn't have to babysit them, but you also should know I can let them have a longer leash because they know what is expected of them. They know the program standards. So to say he doesn't have control or to blame him is completely wrong. And to question what he did, one, you're questioning what the whole university did, because the whole university basically had a hand in making these decisions. And you're questioning him and his staff's like morals.
Mhm.
Like there's no way they are going to let these guys do what they want and play and be a part of the team when they clearly not only made a possible police and criminal uh, mistake or charge, punishment, whatever. They also just broke team standards. Like they violated what the Bradley program stands for and believes in. And so that's, I think, another issue in itself. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's now again, I we don't know all the details. Do I hope it is just they made the mistake of inviting girls to their rooms on a road trip and that's the only mistake that they made? Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I know these guys. I think highly of them. I don't, and Jay Sean's already been cleared, and that's a good thing, and maybe has can lead to more good things. But um, even if they did that, even if that is the mistake that they made, that is still in my mind a suspension worthy event. Even if Bradley was 14-1 or whatever, how many games he played, if that happened, that is still a suspension worthy thing, because that shows Wardle has control of his program. That shows that no one is above the program, which is something Wardle has preached since day one. And that also shows that like program standards and following the rules are more important than winning. And I know these donors are unhappy with probably that at times when it comes to winning. But to me, having a coach who doesn't like accept anything above team standards is what you want, and that is who you want to be leading your program. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, and
I mean, there's a lot to unpack with it all for sure.
yeah, and uh, a lot of the times, especially when you are building a mid-major program like Wardle is, The big thing a lot of people harp on is culture. You have to build a certain culture. And what he is doing by laying these suspensions down is building that culture. He's making sure everybody knows, hey, if you do this, you step out of line, this is what's going to happen. I
Mhm.
don't care if you're one of our best players. I don't care if you're one of the best players in the Valley, like Elijah Childs. You have to adhere to team standards and stuff like that. And a lot of people were complaining, you got four players out with suspension, and it's like he did the right thing. I can't recall another instance where there's been something like this other than I think it was a few years ago. One other player had a problem where he transferred out and his mom made a big deal about it. I can't remember his name.
Uh, JoJo McGlasson.
Yes, Jojo McGlasson. That's the only other player I recall so far from Wardle's time here where there's been an issue like this.
Yeah, I mean he's a very I mean look, Wardle's a great guy. I loved being a manager for him. He's a great guy, great coach, great person to lead a program. Um, and there's times where you have to be the the you know the person that lays the hammer down, and if it is to four of your better players and basically four starters. I know Jay Sean doesn't start but play starter minutes.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do, because he looks at this and he says, and this is what I hope a coach that I'm a fan of would do, and say, you guys broke the rules, you get punished for it. And all you younger guys, because it's a young team, all
Mhm.
you younger guys, this is what happens when you break the rules. And he's always been that way. And there's a lot of times in practice, it's no one on the team is above making mistakes and having to go over it with Coach Eve, the strength and conditioning coach, and do the stair thing, or throw the medicine ball. Like, no one is above that. The only breaks I have ever seen him give players in practice and stuff like that is guys who play a lot of minutes maybe don't practice as much. Now that's not to say if they make a mistake they don't get punished for it, but it's keep guys off their feet. And
Mhm.
you played 33 minutes, like Daryl Brown for example, and Nate, right? Like last year, like played 33 minutes a game. Go easy the next day in practice, but you make a mistake, you still have to be there mentally. So it's like he doesn't give guys breaks. He doesn't give anyone extra slack. Now, does he trust guys to make decisions and maybe gives them a little longer leash? Yes, but will they? What what we're seeing is those guys still get punished for
Right.
mistakes. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean I mean he's a no one's above the program guy, and you're seeing that right now with his decisions with this. And I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, we still have to figure out what's going to happen with the whole police investigation. But you think about Jay Sean obviously being cleared means he played last night and he'll be back next year, I assume. But it makes you wonder what's going to happen with Terry Nolan, if what happens with the police report, and if that affects him, being at Bradley next year, and what exactly that means. Um,
Yeah.
and not to mention, Eli and Daniel could potentially come back next year with the extra year of eligibility. I don't think either of them will, but it's just that's another aspect to think about. Is could Terry and even be asked to come back next year?
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure this will all be once we start to learn more and more, all this will be taken into consideration going forward with those players. Last thing I want to talk about with Bradley is obviously the season hasn't gone as we expected. And I've kind of stepped back the last week or so. And I mean, you've mentioned this before, and I think other people are starting to realize it. This team is not very experienced. There's a lot of newer guys. Whether they have a year of college experience, I put quotations around that, or not, because I mean, some of these guys have college experience, but it was more off the bench. It was like in a reserve roles, things like that. And right now, with with the suspensions, you're looking at pretty much about four guys who are starting who don't have major minutes. and it's a learning and building experience. I understand right now the results aren't what we expected, especially I think Wardle's in his 6th year now. Not what you expected, but at the same time, this is a very young team, very new to the system, and you got to take into account everything that's happened this year. The pandemic eliminated pretty much any kind of real preseason or off-season training that they usually have. And I think going forward, going into this off-season, I think we should be a lot more hopeful and not as dejected as fans of the program because they're going to get a full off-season. They're going to get a full preseason, things like that, because things are slowly getting back to normal. So they're going to get more of a realistic offseason to learn the system, learn the program, learn more that, some of these new guys that transferred in or these freshmen, which we have a lot of, are actually going to really be fully immersed in the program for the first time. So I think we should be a little more optimistic you know, than the way things have gone so far. And that's just my thought right now. I don't know how you feel about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at the season and think of it as a failure and stuff like that because we had such high expectations with everything we were hearing, and we've had 320 plus win seasons and stuff like that. But when you step back and look at it, like you look at who was on the court against Missouri State for those two games, it was one player who played him at Bradley last year, and that was Ville, and he came off the bench, played 15 to 17 minutes. Like going into this year, you had Ville, Jay Sean, Eli, and Danye. Four guys who had played, and Ari Boya, but Ari's been hurt for pretty much the whole year. Four guys who played for Bradley last year. Ville came off the bench. Danye was kind of the third or fourth guard on the team last year, and Antonio Thomas, but he again doesn't really play too much. He's kind of been forced to play with the suspensions and stuff. So you really have two guys, Eli and Jay Sean, who played starter minutes last year, who were big time contributors to the team. You had two or three other guys who were bench guys, role guys, who now are you're expecting to take on a little more, and then you have everyone else, right? Like you, and that's where you need the summer workouts and you need the fall practices to get that togetherness and get that experience playing together, especially when you have guys and you look like Terry, Kev were both and Rink were all with the program last year, but they played on scout team. When you play on scout team, you are playing with each other, obviously, but you're probably like when I was a manager, like one of the coaches had to jump in every now and then. And you are often imitating a player on the opposing team. So when Terry Nolan, who wants to drive to the basket and create, now has to play a guy who's going to come off and he's right-handed. Now he has to play a guy who wants to come off a screen to his left and pull up for three. So now all of a sudden you don't get to work on your game all the time when you're on scout team. So it's I mean that's tough. And I think this year we're seeing the Valley's is just as good as it has been. So the Valley didn't exactly take a step down, but you're seeing a team that just doesn't have the chemistry playing together. Then you have the COVID layoff, and you and I talk from a gambling perspective. Fade teams coming off COVID layoffs. Bradley can't had their COVID layoff and kind of struggled. And it's just I think when you look at it, you say there's Bradley's basically playing with a team that has either freshmen and haven't played college basketball before, or in a guy like Rink's case, sat out for hasn't played basketball for a year and a half. Terry and Kev haven't played competition high level basketball for a year. Like it's you have to get back into that rhythm and that flow, and you need exhibition games, you need non-conference games, you need all that kind of stuff, and they didn't have that this year. And and the other thing too is like it's not like they're getting blown out every night. Like obviously the Missouri State games, are
Yeah.
different, but like they were in both those games at Indiana State. They were in the one game against Loyola. They swept Evansville. Like more than half of their conference games that they have lost this year, they have been in them. So it's not like they're getting blown out every night. Like Wardle still has them competitive. Um, but you look at a team like Drake and Loyola, veteran teams who have been around, who know how to play with each other, are succeeding. Illinois State, Bradley, Valpo, teams that had to replace guys and had to figure out minutes and who's going to score. Like those are the teams that are struggling. Young teams are those are the teams that you are seeing struggle right now. And
Well, yeah.
it's a
Even
perfect example of it.
yeah, even look at a team like SIU who had a pretty good year last year. I mean, they're still really, really young. The
Hmm.
expectations were probably a little too high for them because they're still really young. They're mainly freshmen and sophomore. And we'll get into more of a Valley look at whole, but that's kind of the last things I had on Bradley. And I think I've started, I think the expectations were up a little too because we saw the potential in the non-conference, and then they had the COVID layoff and everything happen. So, I mean, the potential's still there, the talent's still there. I think we should still be optimistic. And what I've been trying to do these last few games is take away from the positives. I know it's not easy to do that when they're losing, but there's still a lot of positives. There's still bright spots. You still see a lot of potential in some of these younger guys. I think that's just something as Bradley fans we should be doing going forward. With that, I'll take a pause here real quick and we'll get back and we'll dive deeper into the Missouri Valley as a whole.